Hello, everybody. Hi, Warren. Dr. Krackov is with us today. Thank you so much for being here on Sunday morning. We are here for a Lead Physician video podcast. Lead Physician is the platform that we use to up-level physicians' careers to a different level. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Krackov. May I introduce you?
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you, Elsie. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We have a very interesting topic today for you. Dr. Krackov is dual certified in diagnostic radiology and interventional radiology. He has over 15 years of clinical experience and 10 years of leadership experience. He's the Chief Compliance Officer of Vein 911 in Tampa Bay, Florida. And he also is the host for the podcast called The Kinked Wire, which is the official podcast for the Society of Interventional Radiology. Thank you so much, Warren, for being here. We have an interesting topic to talk about, which is when organizations are choosing physician leaders, because there's a growing need as the complexity of healthcare is getting even more and more complex. What kind of physician should we be looking for? Should we be looking for a specialist? Should we be looking for a generalist? I mean, these are things that come up all the time, and I hear it, I see it. What are your thoughts on that? Let's start there.
Sure. And again, thanks very much for having me. I agree with you exactly how you put it. Healthcare is becoming so more complex, and we as physicians are having to specialize and subspecialize so much. And I sometimes think that there's a bit of a danger perhaps in becoming super subspecialized in our leadership positions as well. Of course, it depends on the organization. So obviously, if you're in a radiology organization or an orthopedic group or something like that, it certainly makes sense to have someone out of that specialty be the leader. But if you're talking, I think, about organizations, hospitals, hospital organizations, more general practice organizations, I sometimes think we may want to think more broadly about who we hire for these positions and maybe make sure that their quote unquote subspecialty is leadership rather than whether they're a critical care pulmonologist versus a pathologist or internist or so on and so forth.
Right. So I mean, you and I are having this discussion before this podcast. Where did this come from? This concept, this discussion that you wanted to talk about, which I think is awesome. Tell us a little bit about your personal story and how you've found leadership and what are the challenges that you've seen.
Sure. So I think, I'm not aware that there's sort of an officially codified pathway to become a physician leader of a more general physician type of organization. And so I've noticed during my journeys that there tends to be a bit of a haphazard approach. So, for example, I've been in hospitals where, I mentioned critical care pulmonology before that. For whatever reason, the custom at that hospital was that critical care pulmonologists took over at the leadership positions. And when somebody got older and decided to retire or they moved on, whoever the next ranking critical care pulmonologist was would sort of by custom take over. And and I think there was a time when that worked, and it may still work to an extent, but those folks may not have the specific training in physician leadership that, as you suggested at the outset, we really need now, given the complexity of healthcare, given the complexity of physicians, physician groups, ownership structures, relationships with hospitals and other organizations. And I think, that person may be great, but you may want to also consider somebody who's really steeped in that leadership tradition.
You just made me think of something. I remember being brought onto a leadership position earlier on in my career. And the reason why I was brought on was because of my clinical expertise. And this is what we see very often is because we see somebody having great clinical expertise that we automatically think that they have the leadership skills. So, and you know what, when I got there and I was sitting in that room with a bunch of administrators and people of other areas of healthcare, I totally felt lost.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. That really resonates. I think because we're trained clinically, of course.
Yep.
There are huge rewards often for doing well clinically, and to be fair, that should be well respected. And being a clinical wizard is a wonderful skill. But you're right, that in no way necessarily translates into hospital leadership or physician level leadership. It might, but you would need the training, and so that when you or me or somebody like us sits down at that board table with everybody else who's got scrolls of paper unrolling of experience in that realm, we can at least feel like we're holding our own in the discussion.
So why would Dr. Krackov, may I call you Warren?
Yeah,
Warren.
please. Yeah.
Warren. So why should somebody hire you as opposed to an internist for a chief medical officer's position for an organization? Why would it be beneficial for a specialist, or maybe not, a generalist, or maybe there shouldn't be a distinction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think when you're sort of on that search committee for the organization, you have to look inwardly a lot and look at what you really want. And again, I don't know, a place like the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, they're probably going to want somebody who knows about bones and joints. I mean, that makes sense to me. But if you're hiring for a community hospital or various hospitals around, I think you really have to look long and hard at that. And though an internist might sound like a great idea, if the internist in question doesn't have the training in leadership, they may find themselves in that position that you were describing earlier, that first day at the board table. And I, like I said, it resonates with me as well. And you don't want that in your physician leader. So it may be in that instance that a radiologist who's leadership trained, has credentials in physician leadership and experience, might be the better choice, particularly because some specialties like radiology, pathology, arguably other specialties as well, actually have hands in all the specialties. So they know, as radiologists, you and I are both trained as radiologists, what the neurosurgeon, some of the things they're looking for, some of the things the internist is looking for, pulmonology, nephrology, so on and so forth. Pathology, probably the same as well. And I think if you have that sort of leadership background, that may serve you better. Which isn't to say, an internist very well might have the leadership background, and that's fantastic.
So that's the point, is to give that specific physician, no matter what his clinical background or her clinical background, a chance in explaining what they can do for your organization, regardless of what specialty or primary care position they've held before. I think that's great. And the other thing is, from the physician standpoint, a lot of times we don't feel like we can step up as leaders because we're a specialist, or because we're a primary care, or because we might have this drive to do so. Let's talk about that. Like, where do physicians fit in, and how should they think about it when they go for a leadership position?
I think it's a wonderful point, because all of us chose our medical specialties in third year of medical school, or maybe earlier for some people, fourth year of medical school, and so on. And to an extent, you're attracted to certain things about that specialty, and we've all sort of gone through various algorithms of what each specialty sort of represents. I jokingly remember folks when I was a third year medical student say, "Oh, you're going into radi holiday. Oh, that ought to be nice." And I don't find it to be that way, but there is that perception, and I think we're all attracted to our specialties for whatever reason. So you're right, you may be sort of pre-programmed by that to think, oh, I couldn't be a leader. That's not something that my specialty does. And I think that's a problem. I think we need to expose all of our trainees in all specialties to the option of leadership. It's not for everybody, and that's fine. But I think you should sort of have the option, or at least know about it. Kind of like in medical school, I rotated through psych and OB. It turned out it wasn't for me. There's nothing wrong with it, though. So I could have decided to become a psychiatrist. And I think similarly, if there's a way to expose folks at least a little bit to the issues related to physician leadership early on, then down the road you may have an allergist say, look, I can do a really good job here leading this organization.
Absolutely. And I think it's how you approach the people, the employees, your staff, the physicians in the organization as a physician leader that really counts. It's not like some people might say, well, no one's going to respect you because you're not one of them, or people there are a lot of naysayers, but the bottom line is, are you that leader who listens? Are you that leader who represents? Are you the leader who are bringing value to your employees so that they can perform at the best of their ability? And I think if you build that trust and you represent and you show what you stand for, I think any physician's going to say, you know what, he may be an allergist, and initially I thought that, or she's an allergist, and I initially thought that she wasn't going to be a great leader, but my goodness.
I think that's 100% right, and just spot on. I mean, you don't know what the road ahead brings. I mean, in the summer of 2019, if you were an infectious disease doc and said, "I want to become the chief medical officer," people would say, "Well, there's just not a whole lot going on with infectious disease. We're managing some of these chronic infectious diseases, but whatever." Meanwhile, 6 months later, you would beg, borrow, and steal to have an infectious disease doc running your organization during COVID. So I mean, again, the best leader, I think, is the best person for the position, whatever their background is.
Right. And the best leader understands their strengths and their weaknesses and fills in those gaps with people around them who can help them with those weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that's really well put.
Thank you so much for this quick conversation. I think this is awesome. Tell us a little bit about how we can listen to some of your podcasts. Where can people reach out to you? Let's start from there. Kinked Wire. 2019, I think you started that, right, Warren?
Yeah. So the Society of Interventional Radiology, which is otherwise a fantastic organization, in their infinite wisdom decided to have me be host. So an organization that otherwise makes great decisions, I think, missed the mark on this. But if you really want to listen to me, you can. And despite my efforts, it's an excellent broadcast, an excellent podcast. We've really got a great team of folks. We're on. There's a long website, but the best way to find us is either to Google our title, which is the Kinked Wire. SIR, or to go to the SIR website and check it out there. And we are obviously a bit more focused on interventional radiology, but we really take in a lot of, take on a lot of topics that are of broad interest to all physicians. And we've got, our listenership from really all walks of life in healthcare. So, I'd love to have folks stop in and comment and take a listen. We appreciate it. Love to have you on at some point as well.
I would love to. Thank you, Lauren. I think there's a lot of to be said in on IR and women in IR, since we're
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. So here's your email. I think you said it's okay for me to share it. Do right now. And then what I would like to say is, if you have a story, if you're a physician, or regardless of whether or not you're not a physician, if you have a topic on physician leadership that you'd like to share, please find me at info@drlcco.com. And if you're a physician interested in leadership training, this is leadphysician.org. We're going to be starting later this summer. So thank you so much, Warren. Thank you. Have a great Sunday. I hope everyone's staying safe, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you very much, Elsie. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.